You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Hello, my little cabbages, and welcome back to another episode of Jazz Cabbage, the show all about examining and demystifying cannabis culture through a delicious culinary lens. I'm your dutiful host, Chala June, and as we begin to bring this inaugural, historical, magical season of the show to a close, I'd like to take this culinary lens we've been polishing over the last few weeks and zoom it out just a bit further. We're stepping back from what's on our plate, why it's there, and who put it there, and taking a closer look at the people who taught us how to eat in the first place. That's right, this two-part Jazz Cabbage season finale is dedicated to all of the parents out there. Now, I'll be the first to admit that the thought of parenthood completely terrifies me. I don't know how you guys do it. Beyond the basics of providing food, shelter, clothing, love, opportunity, there are so many sacrifices involved with raising children and so many conflicting opinions on what's the right or wrong way to do so. I have so much respect and admiration for the parents and guardians in my life who are bringing up the next generation of great thinkers and feelers. But personally, I may be a childless gunkle for life. But as someone who takes that role very seriously, knowing how to support my siblings and friends as they care for their little ones is the best way for me to do my part. After all, it does take a village to raise a child. Yet, even though Pew Research reports that 88% of Americans think weed should be legal in some capacity, the taboo around caregivers who use cannabis still persists. Luckily, there is a growing movement of pot parents and canna-moms who are actively working to stop the stigma. This week, I spoke to one such parent, Maine-based pastry chef Tara Cannaday. She opened up about how her job at an edibles brand has impacted how she talks to her teenager about weed. Welcome back to Jazz Cabbage. I'm your host, Chala June, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with Tara Cannaday, a Portland, Maine-based pastry chef, entrepreneur, writer, canna-mom, and the executive chef for bespoke edibles brand Pot and Pan. Tara, welcome to Jazz Cabbage. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
I'm so excited to chat with you because this is actually our first time officially meeting, which feels crazy because I've followed you on Instagram. We followed each other for years now. And it's been so exciting not only to keep up with the insanely delicious and creative treats that you post, but also to see you really get your flowers from being cast on this latest season of Food Network's Summer Baking Championship to receiving not one, but two Best of Portland nominations for Best Chocolatier and Best Recreational Dispensary for Pot and Pan. So I am beyond thrilled that we finally get to connect and chat about the most important things in life: food, weed, and family.
I love it. I'm so happy to be here, and meeting you virtually is like such a dream. I remember, oddly enough, my first Cherry Bomb Jubilee, seeing you like from a distance and completely fangirling, but being so scared to like run up to you like a crazy person and be like, Chala, I'm such a huge fan. But maybe next year if you're there.
You absolutely should have, because that has happened to me more than once, actually, specifically at Cherry Bomb Jubilee. And I love it every time. It goes straight to my head. It's great.
I mean, and you deserve that. Let's be honest. Like, you're such a light.
Oh, I appreciate that, because you are someone who is not only so talented and so passionate in this culinary cannabis space, but also you bring so much joy and jubilance in everything that you do. So I'm just so excited. I'm so excited.
Yay, thank you.
As I was researching this episode, I was actually really surprised to learn that before you entered into the world of pastry and of cannabis, you actually studied music in college and started your career as a performer. And cooking was more of a side hustle. What eventually made you decide to go pro as a pastry chef? And when did cannabis come into the picture?
So food has been a huge part of my life. I am a second generation single mom, and my mom always brought food around when we were entertaining with friends and family. And so I grew up with this sense of like, okay, magical things come out of the kitchen, and there's so much fulfillment in feeding other people. So my time in college when I was a performer, we would get together before or after gigs or for rehearsals. And I was the one who was always like, okay, last week I made cookies, but this week, like, I want to make something even better that we can enjoy together after we practice. I've always been really passionate about cooking and feeding people and making them feel joy through food, but also through music. And when my daughter was born, I was a junior at Berkeley and had these big grand plans to become like a touring background singer. But knowing early on that I was going to be kind of raising her on my own, I thought that it might not be fair to bring a newborn out on the road with me. So I almost immediately was like, okay, what is something that I've seen other people succeed in? And that's food. Like, there are so many different paths in culinary and food and hospitality. So I knew if I like at least got a fundamental knowledge professionally from culinary school, like maybe I could explore a couple of different avenues that would be conducive to being a mom. And that's exactly what happened. Yeah, I went to culinary school, and I think Lexi was, she was like 18 months when I started. And I ended up going on to pastry chef around Boston, opened a bakery, and Lexi was literally living in the bakery with me during the holidays. So she got a really good taste of what it's like to just work hard, and was my little taste tester. Still is, obviously not with any cannabis in it, but it's great.
I love the idea of a little bakery baby and just walking in and seeing like having like a 5-year-old hand you a cookie. Like, that seems like an ideal scenario.
Oh, and it was just that. It was so funny. She was there in the thick of it. She'd get off the bus and come right in, and sometimes she'd be stickering boxes or stamping boxes for me, and we made it work. It was great.
I love that your culinary start also happened in Boston, because actually when I first started cooking, it was when I was in college in Boston up the street at Emerson College. And yes. I had a whole crisis my junior year. It's always junior year. I had a whole
what
crisis.
Is it about junior year?
I don't know what it is about junior year. But I had a whole crisis where I was getting my degree in literature and publishing, and I was like, writing's what I'm good at, but food's what I'm passionate about. I should have went to culinary school. I should have blah, 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 blah. And there was no way culinary school was happening. But I just cold emailed a bunch of restaurants and was like, I've worked on a food truck for a year. If you need someone to do prep, hit me up. And that's how I got my first real restaurant job. And then they trained me to work the line, and it really went from there. But people don't really understand the particularities of working in a Boston kitchen, I think.
Oh, it is its own unique little experience.
To say the least.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm so grateful for the places that I was able to work and come up, but staging at some of these places, so intense. And you're in these basement kitchens. You're like, where am I? Is it noon? Is it midnight? Like, just quite the experience. But that kind of stuff is what teaches you all the things that you need to know. And so many things that I've found run parallel to other areas in my life, not in the kitchen. So lots of good lessons to be learned if you're working in Boston kitchens, I would say.
A true trial by fire. But truly, anytime I've been stressed in any other kitchen or any other job, I just think, okay, if I made it through Boston, I can make it through this.
Yes, absolutely. I've got the same mantra going, so it works. It works.
And so when did cannabis come into the picture as a part of your career?
I, for fun, as almost like a way to continue to challenge myself when I owned my first bakery, I would make edibles on the side and just for myself and for friends and family. But what I was finding was that I didn't have the knowledge of cannabis itself to be able to provide a consistent experience for people, which I've learned through my time here at Pot and Pan is so important. And for me, like I'm a proud low dose cannabis edible user. There is absolutely a market for higher doses. And I think for so long, that's kind of what has been out in the market. But I was actually never able to participate in edibles because I would get so messed up and still need to function and be a mom and go to work. So I took it upon myself to start creating, and the food piece of edibles is one thing, right? Like I felt confident that I could make things taste delicious, but I never wanted to get anyone too stoned because I mean, we've all had at least one experience where we're like, wow, I did not plan on getting to the point of hearing colors.
Right.
So I, right before Pot and Pan, was running a food cart here in Portland, Maine, and kind of got to this place of like, I have a daughter who's getting older. The idea of closing my bakery, because I did close my bakery in order to move to Maine to start the food cart, was to have more time with Lexi. And the business had taken off so quickly with the food cart that it was either like get another brick and mortar or a couple more carts, but then I'm not gonna have that quality of life again. So I connected with Pot and Pan, who is also at this kind of point of wanting to grow and join the recreational market here in Maine and really elevate their edibles. And Carrie John Wilson, who is one of the founders and owners of Pot and Pan, she was somebody who had come to my macaron cart. Sugar Sugar was the name. She was a big fan, and we ended up connecting and realized that it was a good fit. We didn't realize at the time how good of a fit. I've been here for, oh my gosh, almost 5 years now. And Carrie John and then Dunya Kaderi, who is another partner and owner. The three of us are just this creative triangle, just doing all of this crazy stuff and really trying to inspire each other every day. So it's been beautiful. It's been really cool.
That's so incredible because I find that, especially when it comes to this sort of culinary space within cannabis, the opportunities and the people in that alignment really just tend to find you. It's kind of like you put out this like bat sonar signal, and the people who are meant to hear it are often just drawn in. It really is so beautiful. And I love especially what you were saying about being a low dose edible user, because there is a whole market for that. And there are so many women and so many people who feel edged out of the edibles market because they can only find these crazy high dose 20, 50, 100 milligram edibles when they want maybe 2, maybe 5. And it can be really challenging because a lot of dispensaries, because they have limited shelf space, they're going to go for the things they quote unquote know will sell. And they're often marketing specifically to high dose users. And there's nothing wrong with a high dosage. I'm a high dosage consumer myself, but there needs to be sort of that spectrum because there is a spectrum of experience. So I really love that you were able to bring your experience to Pot and Pan and really take it in this direction that has produced all of these really incredible results. And you have some really gorgeous looking products too. I was looking at those chocolate bars and kind of salivating as I was getting ready.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. It's been really fun, like going through the product development process. Like we have such rigorous standards for R&D for everything that we do. So I kind of think of product creation in the same way that I think of menu development or ideas for cakes in the passe. So everything is truly inspired by food experiences that have inspired me in the past. And it's, again, really cool to share that with other people and be able to feed them, but also make them feel good. That's that one thing with cannabis. Like when people come to me, whether they are parents or friends or people who have had bad experiences that are curious, it's cool to be like, we're treating this as an ingredient that is just going to make you feel so much joy, and you're going to enjoy the way that it tastes, because everything tastes good without the cannabis in it. We just use the cannabis as a little added secret ingredient, just a touch, and everything's really balanced. And we've found that people are really excited about what we're doing here, and we hope to continue to grow and add to our product line and overall brand experience with Pot and Pan.
And that's so exciting because it's creating more opportunities for people to be able to engage with cannabis in a really intentional way, which is, I think, really important as we're on this precipice of potentially federal legalization and recreational dispensaries popping up all over the country. It feels really important that people are able to know there is an entry point for every kind of consumer. We don't all have to be ripping blunts. We don't all have to be doing crazy bong packs. Like, there is really an entry point for every single person. In addition to your stunning pastry work and your work with Pot and Pan, you're also a contributor for Edible Maine, and you write an incredible column called Toss the Taboo, which I highly suggest that everyone who is listening check out. Through the column, not only do you educate readers on the wonders of culinary cannabis and how it can be incorporated into an everyday routine, but you often share your experience as a parent who consumes, which I find really beautiful and poignant because there is so much stigma around consumption, especially when you are a parent or a caregiver. In a recent edition where you were writing about cutting out alcohol for a month, you wrote, and I would like to quote it here, "During the week, I'd opt for a 2.5 milligram Mainberry punch gummy before dinner and saw how it shifted the time I was spending with my daughter between dinner and bed. Instead of being glued to our phones, we play board games, have more in-depth conversations about our days, and even plan some movie-themed dinners we would then cook together." I was really moved by reading that because in just a few sentences, you really did poke a hole in this taboo that exists where, because of reefer madness and all of this other propaganda from the failed war on drugs, our culture tends to paint cannabis use and responsible parenting as incompatible. But the truth is, when it's used intentionally, cannabis can be an exceptional tool in a parent's self-care toolkit. So I'm curious as to how cannabis has supported you through the challenges of motherhood and what motivated you to start speaking out actively against this taboo that many canna-moms face.
You know, I feel like everyone has something that maybe feels taboo to them or might feel taboo to their crowd that they're around, right? So they don't want to talk about it. It's alcohol for some people. I mean, it could be eating sweets, right? Or like overindulging in certain foods. But for me, as somebody who has used cannabis, whether it was smoking flower or making edibles at home, literally since I was in high school, I was never a drinker. I kind of started drinking when I went to college. But for me, from the start of my time using cannabis, it always opened up this like creative window for me, and allowed me to be a little bit more authentically and unapologetically myself, which I don't always feel like I have when I am not consuming cannabis. So I think when my daughter was younger, I definitely shied away from acknowledging that I was a consumer, but had no problem telling the world that I would want to go home and have a glass of wine or clink my champagne glass to celebrate a sales goal I hit at the bakery or whatever that might be. And I think making the switch into working in cannabis and having access to consumers who are sharing stories with me and knowing that, oh, there are other people out here that are feeling the same way about this wonderful plant that helps people medicinally, helps so much with mental health. Like that's been my big thing. My mental health has changed so tremendously from microdosing cannabis daily. Like it's given me a lot of confidence that I have never had. And so I think I reached a point where I was just sick and tired of basically lying to people when they'd be like, oh my gosh, like, how do you do all of these things? You're a single mom, you're balancing running a business, getting your daughter to play dates and extracurriculars and all of these things. And I finally was like, I'm not lying anymore. I'm going to start telling people. And if they don't support it, maybe I can educate them and tell them like what it has done for me. And if they're still not supportive, that's okay. And I had to kind of be okay with like maybe losing some friends along the way, or maybe getting some like bad feedback, which for me, like I aim to please. I love making people happy. It's to my core, something that's very important to me. But I think once you get rid of caring what other people think, you find that there are so many people out there who relate. And that's what this is all about for me. Like speaking to people who don't feel like they can openly talk about this. And I'm going to bring it back to pot and pan, but through our packaging and kind of like the lifestyle branding that we have, we want people who have kind of like hid in the background with their cannabis consumption to proudly display products and feel like they can share our edibles with people proudly, not stash them away in like a secret box in the closet, not hide them. We want people to share the joy and share what they're feeling with other people. So that was very long-winded, but all of that to say, I really think that it's about not caring and being confident that like, if this is something that makes you feel good and makes you a better person or parent or friend or partner at the end of the day, like that should be enough. And if it's not enough for people, then that's on them, not on you.
Back in a flash with more Jazz Cabbage.
This episode is brought to you by Plugra European-style butter, crafted for those who demand precision and exceptional results in the kitchen. With 82% butter fat and a slow churn process, Plugra gives you flakier crusts, fluffier cakes, and rich, melt-in-your-mouth pastries. Because great baking starts with great butter. Unlike standard American butters, which have only 80% butter fat, Plugra ensures the ideal moisture and fat balance so your recipes turn out just right every time. That's why professional chefs trust Plugra and home bakers love it. Plugra's slow churn process creates a smooth, creamy butter that gives dough a soft, pliable texture, making rolling, folding, and laminating effortless. Whether you're perfecting a buttery pie crust or layering a delicate croissant, Plugra helps you bake with confidence. Experience the difference for yourself. Find Plugra in stores near you or visit plugra.com. That's Plugra.com.
Welcome back, my little cabbages, to more Jazz Cabbage. Different strokes for different folks, but it's so important to be open and talking about this stigma because for so many people, kind of like you said, it is a source of shame and it's a source of secrecy. But I know people in my own family who have been like, yeah, cannabis makes me a better mom because if I'm upset and I go outside and I take a little hit from my vape and I come back in, that's the difference between me calmly asking for something to be put away and me going on a full tirade. And It really does make such a difference for so many people in how they're able to care for themselves and how they're able to regulate their emotions, like you said, with mental health, because parenthood has an immense number of stressors and everybody deals with that stress in different ways. But cannabis is a really incredible tool that can help people cope with and deal with that stress that isn't going to take the same toll as, a glass of wine every day or a harder substance. And that's not to say that cannabis is for every parent. That's not to say that it's a end-all be-all cure for anyone who's dealing with any sort of stress. But that is to say that the people who it does work for and the people who do feel like it improves their quality of life shouldn't have to be walking through the world carrying all of this shame and stigma on their shoulders.
Exactly.
And for a lot of parents, even if they are longtime regular consumers, the thought of talking to their children, especially their teenagers, about cannabis is incredibly daunting. There's this fear that any talk about it might feel like encouraging their kids to try it out themselves, and there might be shame of feeling like a bad parent. As a parent of a teen daughter, what advice do you have for parents and caregivers, whether they consume themselves or not, who might want to have an open dialogue with their young people about cannabis?
That's a great question. I will say when my daughter became more curious about what I was doing for work, so she would have been about 12 when I started working in cannabis professionally, I would absolutely dodge the subject, right? Like I just didn't know how to approach it. But what I will say is having the open and transparent conversations about cannabis and the benefits and why I personally consume, because she will ask me. I think that's the key. It's being honest and vulnerable. I think that in whatever capacity has maybe also steered my daughter away from like irresponsibly wanting to try things like cannabis or alcohol, things that younger kiddos shouldn't be doing. She feels educated. She feels, I think, a sense of maturity because I am able to have these conversations with her that feel like adult topics, adult conversations. I think that's what is important. Like kids want to know that they can be transparent with their adults. She knows if it's a pot and pan package or other edibles or any cannabis related packaging. I've showed her like what to look for as far as markers to say like, hey, this is adult candy, or this does contain cannabis, so you cannot taste test this. I've kind of empowered her to like know what to look for, so she also doesn't accidentally eat something or consume something that she's not supposed to be consuming.
I really love that you approach it from this place of, like you said, just deep honesty, because I feel that young people, and especially teenagers, are more than anything looking to know that, one, their parents and their caregivers are being honest with them, but also, two, that they trust them.
Yes.
And that they trust them to be able to make informed decisions and be able to take in information and make decisions that feel aligned. And I think that's really just such a beautiful approach, because I know personally, I came from a very religious, don't do it, don't look at it, don't even talk about it kind of household. And I ended up in a lot of situations I probably shouldn't have.
Fair.
And may not have if I actually knew what was going on, but my curiosity got the best of me. And I think that's the thing, like you said, with young people, is they're just so naturally curious. They just want to know what's going on. They just want to be a part of the conversation. And I think that if we completely shut them out, that curiosity is going to run overtime, and they're going to take it upon themselves to find those answers. So it can be really important just to have those open, honest conversations and say, no, this is what's going on. And as long as you're informed, you know how to keep yourself safe. Because I think that at the end of the day, we can all agree all we want is just to be able to keep our young people safe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, the transparency in saying things like, hey, this is going to affect your body and your brain differently than it's going to affect an adult. Like, I think that is the key. So it's worked out really well for us. And similar to you, like I was always about trying different things when I was growing up, because I lived with a single mom and kids are going to push boundaries if they can. And I always want to create a safe space for my kiddo to say like, hey, I have a question about this and you might not like that you have to answer it, but I need you to answer it so I feel safe and I feel heard.
And that's beautiful, because then that just keeps the pathways of communication open for any sort of tough conversation, not just around cannabis, but anything later on.
Absolutely.
In life. On that thread of safety, something that gets brought up often when talking about cannabis and parenting are these cases of accidental ingestion that we see year after year. Just yesterday, our producer H was telling me about a Slate article they read where a woman went to visit her close friends and their 3-year-old, and somehow the child ended up unsupervised for 15 minutes and ate an entire Ziploc bag of weed gummies that the friend had in her purse. And tragically, the story ended with the kid being rushed to the ER to have her stomach pumped, and the parents completely cutting this friend out of their life. Of course, there were a lot of precipitating factors in this particular story, but as an edibles professional and expert, what are some preventative measures that parents, caregivers, and guests alike can take when storing and keeping edibles in the home?
I think it's very important, again, to just make sure that people that live in your household have the conversations with them so they know what to look for. Talk about warning signs on packaging. Talk about dose and how it affects people differently, even for kids. Using things like this is adult candy or this is not for you to consume, but we have other things in the house that are fine. And just showing them, even if it's a younger kiddo that can't read, right? Certainly keeping things out of reach. But as kids get older, again, like I keep my cannabis out. I keep my edibles on my bar cart next to my spirits and my nice glasses because I know that I've educated the people in my household to know like, hey, you shouldn't touch this. And if you're an adult and you are going to touch this, just know what you're getting into. I think we here in Maine and in many other states that have recreational cannabis, there are very rigid rules and regulations around compliant packaging and proper labeling and then testing. So I think as long as people know who they're purchasing from and it's a trusted vendor or supplier, whether it's edibles or pre-rolls or vapes or whatever it might be, flour, just knowing that things should come in child-proof packaging, things should be tested as well. So you know if you are going to consume what you're getting into, but also that like it would be difficult for a kiddo to get into packaging if it's actually in childproof packaging.
I personally can't get into some of that childproof packaging myself. So
me either. It is such a struggle. We have these really cute gummy containers, but I still struggle getting into them. So they're working for sure.
That's how you know they work. And for people who might want to even take it a step further and lock up their goods, there are many companies out there that make lockable stash boxes so that you can keep your stuff secure. If maybe you have a teen who might want to get into your stuff or just anybody who might be snooping, there are brands like Tulip and Snugbox, which is a mom-founded company specifically for keeping young ones safe and also making sure that your goods are secure. So the options are out there and it's not impossible to keep people safe. We know that many households have alcohol, like you said, in the home, either on display or openly on a bar cart. And in the same vein of being able to keep your alcohol in a place where you know it's safe and secure, it shouldn't be that far of a leap to think about your cannabis in the same way.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned storing things in like a lockbox or a safe place that truly like younger kiddos couldn't get into, because that is important. I forget I'm coming from a place of having an almost adult, so it feels a little different, but for sure, I think that's such a great option and great to mention.
Because toddlers will tear through everything. And that's okay. Just
mean,
keep it out
everything.
of reach.
Exactly.
Don't put them in a Ziploc bag in your purse like this person in the Slate article. Or if you do, keep the bag out of reach and make sure the kid's not a climber.
Exactly. That's awful. So brutal. That's like my worst nightmare.
I'd love to wrap this up on a more positive note and ask what your personal hopes and dreams are for the cannabis parents of the future once we have successfully tossed the taboo.
Ooh, love that. My hopes and dreams for cannabis consumption in the future for parents and adults is just that at the end of the day, it's not scary. It doesn't have to be scary or intimidating. I really, truly want people to be able to consume proudly and feel the joy and the benefits that cannabis has brought to my life. I really believe that I have become a better parent for my child, a better friend for my child and my people in my circle, because cannabis allows me to feel things in different ways. It's allowing me to cook in ways that I hadn't cooked in years because I was burnt out from working long hours. Like I create so differently, and I so badly want that for other people who don't realize that that's an option because they're nervous or they're uneducated. I mean, there's so much information out online that paints cannabis in this negative light, and it does not have to be that way. So I really hope that we will get to a place, and I know we will get to a place because people like you and I are doing the groundwork to make people feel supported and confident in consumption. So
yes, and that's such an important point, is that there is so much support out there. If you are a canna parent listening and you're not sure how to broach these conversations with friends or family, there is support. There are canna-mom pages out the wazoo. There's so much support out there for people to be able to not only consume safely, but confidently, and feel like they don't have to bear the brunt of this stigma or of any cultural shame that might exist around cannabis. And that's why it's so important to have conversations like this and why I'm so passionate about it. So, Tara, thank you so much for coming on the show. It really has been such a joy and such a privilege to be able to chat with you. And as we wrap up here, I just want to ask you how our audience can find you and keep up with your work.
yes, Chala, thank you so much for having me. You are a dream. And this is like a little bucket list item for me to be able to like virtually hang with you. So thank you.
Oh, I'm touched.
People can find me on Instagram at Chef Tara Cannaday. So that's Cannaday. And you can also reach out via the Pot and Pan website. I have a little ask me if people ever have questions. I genuinely love helping people and empowering people to consume confidently. So you can always hit me up on the website or on social media. I'd be thrilled to chat.
Incredible. Tara, thank you again. And we'll talk soon. I'm going to have to pop up to Maine and come see you sometime.
Yes, please. Let me know when you do so I can show you around and we'll go to all the canna hot spots.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Check out our show notes to learn more about our guests and other cannabis resources. Jazz Cabbage is produced by Taylor Early, H. Conley, and me, Chala June. Sound design and mixing is by Sam Gerardi. Jazz Cabbage is powered by Simplecast. Jazz Cabbage, hosted by Chala June, is a production of Heritage Radio Network. Food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe. For more Jazz Cabbage shenanigans, find us on Instagram at Jazz Cabbage Pod. If you want to drop me a note, you can write to the pod at jazzcabbagepodcast@gmail.com.